This is Camp Countdown, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast series. I'm your host, Kyle Cushman, and on today's show, we're talking all about 2024 draft pick Matt Lahey. Lahey was taken by the Maple Leafs 200th overall in the 7th round in this summer's draft, and he's very much a long-term project. In fact, that's exactly what Wes Clark said at the draft, that in a 7th round, looking for some of those diamond in the rough type players, and Matt Lahey has the runway to potentially be one of those guys. 6'5" defenseman, July 2006 birthday, so one of the younger players in the draft and one of the youngest players in the Maple Leafs organization now as a result. Played last season in the BCHL with the Nanaimo Clippers. Lahey is going the collegiate route. He's going to play in the USHL this upcoming season with the Fargo Force, and after that, we'll go the NCAA route. And where he's actually going to play at school is a bit murky right now. He's announced his commitment at Clarkson University in the ECAC. The Athletic said after the draft that he's actually going to North Dakota. So it's a bit unclear where Lahey will end up for the 2025-2026 season. But for right now, we know that he's going the USHL route with Fargo this upcoming fall after being selected in their draft process this past spring in the 5th round, 75th overall by Fargo. And Lahey's an interesting player. I talked to him a little bit at development camp. Obviously, the 6'5" frame, the physicality, defensive game is all kind of the traits that stand out for him. But the intelligence of the player is a big factor here. In talking with some people about Lahey in the upcoming conversation we'll get to, the intelligence of the player, his brain, his smarts is really the attribute that a lot of people talk about. He won Scholastic Player of the Year with Nanaimo after his rookie season. And the perspective that he had at such a young age is kind of the element of his game, the aspect of his game that kind of stands out to me. At a very young age, at 14, 15 years old, he was drafted in the 3rd round by Prince George in the WHL. And for a lot of those players at that time going relatively high in that draft process, and all of your peers or most of your peers going the WHL route, that's an enticing thing for a lot of players. And of course, the cachet of just playing in the WHL for those kids out west, playing in the Ontario League for kids here in the Ontario area, things like that. There's a lot of cachet that holds in terms of players wanting to go the major junior route. But instead of doing that, Matt Lahey opted to go the collegiate route. And talking with him about that decision, he opted to do it and set himself up in this path to play a couple years in the BCHL and ultimately go to the USHL and later the NCAA, because it gives him such a long runway to develop as a player. Matt Lahey is going to have, I think, up to 5 years, if all the rules and things continue the way that they currently are, to impress the Maple Leafs enough to sign an NHL contract. And that's a big difference. We're talking about 3 years, ages 20 to 23, 24. Those are significant years of development time for a lanky defensive defenseman like Matt Lahey, the way he is right now, to develop into his body, to develop his game over the course of multiple years against tough competition in the NCAA, to ultimately potentially earn an NHL contract. And if he had gone the major junior route in the WHL, he only has 2-year window to really do that, and essentially a year and a half to impress enough to sign an NHL contract. So for Lahey, understanding that decision, talking to him a little bit at development camp, and seeing that perspective from such a young player is really impressive and is backed up by a lot of what scouts have said about his game, in that the smarts are definitely there. And we'll see kind of how the physical side of his game matures, how the offensive side of his game develops, things like that. But at the very least, he has a strong baseline as an intelligent person and a smart player as well. And so I'm excited to get to my conversation today with head coach and general manager of the Nanaimo Clippers, Colin Birkas, and talk a little bit about Matt Lahey, how he's played the past couple of seasons, and some really high praise for him as a person, as a player, and what he could potentially do over these upcoming seasons. So let's get to that now. My conversation with head coach, general manager of Nanaimo in the BCHL, Colin Birkas. Very excited to be joined now by general manager and head coach of the Nanaimo Clippers, Colin Birkas. Colin, thank you for taking some time out of your summer to jump on here and talk about a little bit about a big player for yourselves last year, Matt Lahey.
Yeah, not a problem.
Big summer for yourselves with Nanaimo there and having Matt Lahey drafted, the first player drafted straight from the Clippers program in 18 years to the NHL. Can you talk a little bit about what that selection means for your program there in Nanaimo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm heading into my sixth season, and it's a team here that consistently wins and does well late in the season, sort of thing. But as our leagues evolve, we've had an eye on developing more high end athletes, getting guys into top end college programs and development camps and NHL picks. So when we took Matt Lahey a couple years ago, we had that in mind. So it has come full circle, and it fulfilled what we had hoped it would, and hoping to continue with that trend of getting kids picked here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and you mentioned bringing in Lahey when he was 16 years old. Can you talk a little bit about what you first saw from him back when he was 16, and obviously that first season playing a bit of a smaller role, and then becoming a big important player for yourself last year?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not the case of the late bloomer or anything. He's always had the size. He was a relatively high pick in the Western League. Played for Team BC, so he had that pedigree. I know his advisor pretty well, and so as it looked more and more likely that he was going to pursue the college route, he connected the two of us. We had him out for a couple of skates, and we made the commitment to each other that, come play in Nanaimo. It's going to be rough to start. We've got an older team. You're going to have to earn your ice time. Games played, minutes per night. We can't really get into too much detail right now, but it's kind of how it played out. He had his ups and downs early on in the year, and then through injuries down the stretch and into the playoffs, he elevated his minutes, played really well. And then he kind of hit the ground running last year and played in our top pair.
Yeah, and you mentioned playing on that top pair and as part of your team awards, getting the most improved player award. Can you talk a little bit about how his game developed last season and ultimately culminating in him being on your top pairing, but as well being an NHL draft pick?
Super smart, mature, hardworking kid. It's just more a matter of growing into his body, one, and two, getting the opportunity. The way he finished year one, I thought he earned the opportunity to at least start the season in the top pair. And to be honest with you, I thought it was something that we'd give him a little bit of rope, and then we'd have to move him down the lineup and, bring a more veteran player in, like is often the case in junior. But he just got better week by week, month by month, and so we left him there. And then he finished the league as finished the season as one of the better defenders in the league. And you look at his numbers, and a lot of people think, oh, he's a big, mean, shutdown D-man. Like, he's a very smart two-way guy. I might be dating myself a little bit here, but he reminds me a lot of Tom Pody.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so playing on that top pairing, and you mentioned being a younger guy, playing up your lineup there and getting that run. He did get to play with a more veteran player there and your captain there, and Brett Murner, hometown kid, captain, all that stuff. What did it mean for Lahey's development over the season to have a sturdy veteran player like Murner there to play with on the top pairing?
I think it was good for the player and the program. Murner was that player a couple years ago. He got to play with some pretty good players here, learned how to manage expectations, win games on Friday nights, but also get better, and how to behave while you're doing that. And so when it came time for him at the end of his career to pass those lessons on to Lahey, it was very impressive, and it was a great opportunity for him. And there was a game down the stretch in Vernon. We had the flu bug pretty bad. We lost two guys to, we thought, broken wrists. Had to go to the hospital, and we're down to 3-4D at the time, and it's not going our way. And Matt Lahey's sick, and he tells me he's going to leave the game, not feeling well. Then he sees 2D go down with shots off the wrist, and he toughed it out and finished the game. And I know that doesn't show up on a score sheet, but it just shows you the fabric of, going to a junior program, playing there for a couple of years, learning from the vets, learning like what it takes to play at the next level. So that was a story I told the Leafs when they interviewed me about him. And it just, you see what you see on the ice, but a kid that age understanding the landscape and not putting himself before the team, I was very impressed.
Yeah, and I've only heard great things about Matt as a person and as a player as well. And one of those things that really stands out is kind of the perspective he had at such a young age to kind of take the initiative to, instead of going the WHL route, playing the junior circuit there in the BCHL and taking that longer route in the collegiate route. And talking with him a little bit at development camp, he mentioned, yeah, like he understood that if he played in the WHL, that's a lot shorter runway to develop as a player, instead of playing a couple years in the BCHL, playing a year in the USHL, then going to the collegiate routes. That's like 4 or 5 year difference in terms of the amount of development time you have as a player. What does it say about somebody like Matt at such a young age, at 16, 17 years old, to have that kind of perspective about like the long term of his personal development, but also his development as a player on the ice?
It's very impressive, and a lesson that I'm going to use in the dressing room for years to come. That first year, he could have went and played in the Western League. There were weeks upon weeks where he was out of the lineup for us that year, and he never told me, but I'm fairly certain the WHL team took notice of that and tried to get him to leave and take the shortcut and go there. And even though he wasn't playing, he was steadfast, and I'm going to be a college player. This is my path. This is the journey that I'm on. And to have a kid at that age, it's so often now, coach, kids want everything right away. And so I'm very impressed by his maturity. He had a plan right from 16 on, and he stuck to it. And very excited to watch what he becomes.
Yeah, and so diving a bit more into Matt on the ice and kind of what he is currently as a player, obviously the big frame at 6'5" is really what stands out. Can you describe a little bit about his defensive game and kind of what made him such an important piece for you guys last year, playing top pair minutes and being a key penalty killer as well?
Well, his brain is the biggest attribute he has. I'd put it one category ahead of his size. The size is what made him super attractive to the NHL for sure. But it's his brain. He's very aware, both sides of the puck. He knows what's going on. He can read the play. Although 6'5", he physically hasn't matured yet. He's not super muscular. He's not done growing by any stretch. And, when I was talking to NHL teams heading into the draft, the one thing I said is whoever gambles on him, and when he fills out, I'm on the bench with him every day. I'm at practice with him. I could see that he knows what to do. And once he's physically a little bit stronger, he's going to be able to do a lot more of the stuff that he sees and I see that he's recognizing. And as he takes that step, I would imagine in the next, 12 to 18 months, as he physically matures, he's going to turn into a heck of a player.
Yeah, and talking about that maturing and what we can see from him in the coming years, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is when you spoke after the draft to The Athletic, you mentioned some of the offensive upside that is yet to come. And I think that partially comes with the smarts as a player. But what do you see as his offensive upside? And obviously not necessarily being the calling card of his game, but how do you see that progressing in the coming years?
It's 100% there. This year it was opportunity. He was stuck behind Brett Murner, who was one of the best power play D in the league. And then you'd argue Issa Perek was one of the other best power play D in the league. So he never really got that opportunity. But he has it. Like I said, he sees the ice. Again, it just comes down to strength. Yeah, he sees passes up ice that other D don't see. He sees lanes in the blue line. Once he gets a little bit quicker and stronger, you're going to see his numbers come. Like I would imagine by the time he's done college, he's going to be on a power play.
And so you talk about being on a power play by that time. What are some of the attributes you see from that offensive side that could lead to him becoming a bit more of that offensive presence in the coming years?
Well, it's going to take opportunity, right? Like he's going to have to be given those minutes to show what he can do. But his vision, like again, I've said it a couple of times, he just reads the play so well. Brilliant player. His body just let him down a little bit this year. Like there were stretch passes, would just be a few miles an hour too slow to hit the forward at the other blue line. He'd have a real good look at a lane and try and snap it through, and it just a split second too late. And I think it's going to all come together this year for sure. And I think Fargo is really lucky, and they're going to be the beneficiary of it.
Yeah, and when he was drafted by the Maple Leafs, head scout at the time, Wes Clark, mentioned that he's a long-term project, and that one of the things that drew to him, of course, the size at 6'5", but also the physical side of his game. And at that age, and you mentioned still growing into his game, can you talk us through a little bit about the physical side of his game and where that is now, and how you can see that as well developing once he adds a bit more mass to his frame?
Yeah. Again, it's going to come down to strength. Like I watch him day in, day out. He engages at the right time. He's physical. He's mean, with an asterisk, I guess. He just doesn't have the strength to do what he wants to do. But like, he knows when to clear the front of the net. He knows how to box out. He plays hard in the corners. But he played a lot of minutes as a young guy, not totally physically developed yet. So as the year went on, you could see him trying. He knows exactly what to do. The brain power's there, but just this is a big summer for him. And as he gets stronger, he's going to be able to impose himself physically. Like, he's too smart. He's never going to be a guy running around making big hits and getting into fights, but he's going to be big, strong, and mean. And when his body catches up, he's going to be able to execute that.
Yeah, and more generally now, just about the BCHL and kind of the state of things out west in the junior league. Obviously, things have been changing quite a bit recently, and people might not be as familiar with the junior circuits out there, just given a lot of people expect picks to come from the major junior circuits that people know, the WHLs, the QMJHLs, the Ontario leagues, even the collegiate circuits down in the U.S. On the path to the NCAA and the USHL. So can you describe for people maybe what things are like right now in the BCHL and the talent that is coming out of that league right now?
It's really evolved. This is my 6th year. The best way I can describe it is it's a full line better. You know, when I first got out here, you know, your top 2-3 lines, top 2 pairings are D1 bound, and you know, and the rest of the guys are probably D3 and CIS bound, U Sport bound. Now it's got to the point where all 23 of your guys are realistically on the radar for D1 programs. I spent pretty much all summer talking to 08 kids that were first, second, third round picks in the various major junior leagues. I think it goes back to what you said earlier in terms of length of runway. You know, major junior is a great path and it works for a lot of kids, but there's a lot more kids that fit closer to what Matt Lahey is. And I think you're seeing NHL teams recognize that too. You know, maybe 10 years ago, Matt Lahey would have got passed up for a major junior guy. But now I think there's years of control and runway to develop. I think teams are seeing it more and more as a better path to pick from. And just by virtue of looking at the Q, for example, we're catching up to them. The USHL pretty much passed them this year as the college path just becomes more and more prominent.
Yeah, and just before I let you go here, one more question about Matt Lahey here. What is kind of the biggest thing that you see as the key for him to make the NHL down the road that he needs to work on in these coming years? I know you've mentioned a little bit about maturing in terms of his body and things like that, but what do you think is the biggest key for him to find that NHL success down the road if he is to make it to that level?
Honestly, it's that, you know, some of it, it's biology. You can't rush it. It comes when it comes. And I think that's something he's at the mercy of. And then the other side of the coin is just putting in the work, you know, until you get there, just keep putting in the work, getting stronger and faster. But like, I think the USHL is going to be a good step for him. Those guys are, you know, big and strong. They compete hard. And I think it's going to force him to really work on the physical side of his game. But really, like, I wouldn't say it's skating or video and stick position. Like, he's a super smart kid, super smart player. He just physically has to develop before he can take the next step.
Awesome. Well, Colin, thanks for taking the time in the middle of summer here, and enjoy the rest of your summer, and best of luck this upcoming season.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you.
Thanks again to Colin for joining the show. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check out tomorrow's episode of Leafs Camp Countdown. We'll see you then.